All right, everybody, welcome back. The last talk of the conference. So all of you who are sick of me but haven't had the sense to turn off the channel yet can rest assured I'm gone until around noon tomorrow when we'll be back with a regular podcast show. I've got Peter with us, and Peter and I guess it's like way back in January, pre-COVID, we did an episode of the podcast. Basically, it was like all the shit that they don't tell you about game development. And so we wanted to revive that for the conference, and so we're here. I'm going to do some social media stuff real quick. Peter, tell the world who you are and what you do.
My name is Peter Kajesta. I'm the founder of Exis Interactive. We work on AAA games, indie games, primarily do external development. And we've been doing it for maybe, I want to say 18, 19 years now. And in that time, we've actually released a couple of indie games as well. And we're working on a few right now. So that's me.
So how has your world been for the last, 9, 10, 12 months?
Man, the title of this talk, all the shit they don't tell you, the re-shitting is upon us. This has been the most insane year for pretty much anybody, let alone people in the crazy industry that we're in. So there's a lot.
The first thing we can jump into is, the effects of COVID. And I mean, obviously, disclaimer here. Yes, this is very bad. People are dying, people are suffering, and that's not good. We know that, we acknowledge that. Don't flame me for that. But, we got to look at the silver lining and shit. We can't run around constantly been like, letting this get us down, because it would drive us all mad. So did y'all have a real office before this?
We did, yeah. There was a small office in downtown Baltimore. And I actually moved to the West Coast about 2.5 years ago. And we had started down the path of already kind of letting everybody work from home. We already had people who were outside of the office. Because frankly, I just never saw a need to pull everyone together, in a giant room. But I'll tell you this, before we get started though, I think some of the topics we might cover in this talk, I think you're going to get a lot of people who are going to push back on it. And I think because I wanted to cover some stuff about publishers, some stuff about all the VCs that are coming into the industry and stuff like that. And I think we're going to get a lot of pushback because there's going to be people that have a lot of great intentions, but those intentions rarely line up with their actions. So, if this is going to be truly a pro level rant session, I think it's important that everyone take what I say with a grain of salt, but also what people working in the industry and that you're going to be interacting with, take what they say with a grain of salt also.
Well, yeah, it's like most everything that we talk about on the show, whether it's contract terms or, deal structures or marketing plans or whatever. The answer is always, it depends.
Yeah.
So whether or not you're having to deal with this and you agree with Peter and I on something is going to be completely, but I mean, hell, if nobody pushed back on us, this would be boring. So, all right. So
COVID,
where do you think we're going to end up on offices? Are people going to keep doing this remotely, or is everybody going to smile and go, oh, let's go back to an office and jump around that way?
So there's been a bunch of larger companies that are instituting, work from home policies that they're claiming that they're going to keep after this is over. There's a lot of benefits to working, remotely. It's better for indies specifically, right? You don't have to pay the high cost of having office space. And people think it's just the rent of the office space, but that's not true, because you got electricity, furniture, equipment, software, you got to buy food. There's just a million costs associated with, cleaning crews, whatever it is, that go with having an office that kind of just evaporate when you're working in the cloud or working remotely. And I think some of the bigger companies are probably going to have a hybrid model, because for them it's not necessarily as easy as everybody just work from home. We'll use some sort of cloud-based solution to handle all of our stuff. For tech companies, it's definitely easier.
The other
But
thing is, I
then
mean,
there's
I've got friends of mine who, I mean, you're out there in Southern California, you know how this is. They would have hour and a half commutes
right.
to get to work. And it's like, okay, so all of a sudden you have an extra 2 to 3 hours a day to do stuff. You know, and that to me, I'm biased. It's like I've been running remote companies for 13 years. Everybody's like, so how did COVID affect? I'm like, nothing. I get up in the morning, I go outside, I come down to my office, and I start working just like I have for, you know, the last, well, in this office, 5 years, but ridiculous, but, you know, virtually the whole time. The difference is we have a 9-year-old that I have to, you know, educate along with my wife. And thank God she's doing the majority of it because you don't want me doing math. I mean, that's the worst possible scenario for a 9-year-old is he learns math from me.
It's better for your mental health though, to not have to go through an hour and a half of a commute every day. Especially around here in California, the commutes just get outrageous. So
yes, I mean, but at times, so the last time I worked in an office for another company, I had about a 20-minute, 30-minute commute, and it was good for, you know, basically just unwinding, you know,
like aligning your thoughts and all. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I left the chaos because a good buddy of mine told me one time, he said, Jay, you are the smartest person I have ever seen when you're in an office. And the minute you leave the office, you turn into a giant dumbass. And I was like,
it's better than being a dumbass in both places.
Well, yeah, it's true. But, you know, that commute used to be the separation point, and it's not anymore. And I am fortunate that I have the ability to, I mean, I can literally walk out my door, shut it, and go into my house, and it's something completely different. It's not like, you know, where I used to live, where my office was about 6 feet from the couch in the living room, and you don't ever really get that distance.
It used to be a big taboo though. Like whenever you'd go pitch to a publisher or investors and they'd ask you, you know, where's your office, where's your team? And you're like, we work virtually. They'd be like, no, that's not, you're not a real company, go away. But now it's, you know, when you see companies like Square Enix, Twitter, Facebook saying, yeah, you can all work from home, all of a sudden it's acceptable.
Well, you couldn't literally get a dev kit from Nintendo unless you had a physical place to go and lock it up. I know several developers who had to figure out ways around that, but you know, it's one of the things. It's like, you know, it's not that much of a stigma anymore. But
well, it opens up a global workforce also. So now I can hire someone who animates in, you know, Bangladesh. I can hire a modeler in Germany, a guy down in Mexico to rig the models, programmers in Latvia. You know, it just doesn't matter. Not that it really mattered for indies to begin with, but it's just more acceptable now to have a remote workforce. Even when you're in pitch meetings with publishers and investors and, you know, the serious business people, you can say, hey, listen, my team is remote. This is the core team. We've done X, Y, and Z together, but the vast majority of them are remote, if not everyone.
The thing is, it's like we could always do it, but now it is more. And we did
it's okay now.
Yeah, we did a virtual career fair back in June, I believe. And my whole premise behind it was, all right, well, I mean, everybody's working from home, so it should be wide open like that. We'll have all these people come in all these different jobs. And it was so frustrating because we had so many of the companies that participated, they were like, we're only hiring locally. And it's like in June. And I'm like, how the fuck are you hiring locally? We're not even allowed to go anywhere, you know? And, you know, but luckily I found out much later that, you know, we had like 6 people, you know, from a company I know interns got hired as full-time people because of that event. And so it has, you know, open stuff, but it is. I wonder, and this is, you know, my take on a lot of this stuff that's coming around COVID, the longer this goes on, the more companies are going to be figuring out like, well, I guess we don't really need to be in an office anymore. You know, do you think that the bigger studios, because I mean, if anybody goes back to an office, it's going to be the big companies.
Right.
You know? Indie studios are like, what the fuck? I ain't got to pay rent. Yeah, we're good. You know, don't worry about it.
Right.
Do you think we're going to see another shifting or delay in production as everybody moves their, office back from the house to a physical building somewhere?
There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of benefits to working remotely. It's good for the environment, it's good for your mental, all that stuff. But there's also a lot of challenges. It's hard to build a company culture when it's all online. It's hard to get that serendipity, that collaborative feel that a lot of game teams need in order to produce great things. Looking over someone's shoulder and just learning something from the people that are on the team with you. A lot of that can still happen online, but it's just a lot easier when you're in person. And I think a lot of the larger companies might do some sort of hybrid model where it's just more acceptable to have more of the team be remote. But I've worked in a studio with, 80, 100 people before, and there's a feeling to it. You feel it inside. You feel like you're part of a team, like part of a group. You guys hang out together, you learn from each other, and a lot of that is missing online. And I think if we learn how to kind of recapture some of that as an online kind of group or an online company, then I think it's going to be a lot easier to shift completely online. There's a lot of cost benefits, there's environmental benefits, mental health benefits. There's less cars on the road. Over here in California, one less car on the road is a godsend. You save money on gas and all these other things. So I think it's really going to come down to whether these large companies can find a way to get that feeling back, because I think that contributes a lot to what your games end up being, your culture, and the kind of interactivity between all the members of your team and how they interact with each other.
Jez has got a good question. Do you think Office Space will start to become a status symbol?
It was. I mean, there used to be this website where you could look at game development offices, and they're spending egregious amounts of money on beautiful placards and like all this other stuff. I remember back when I walked through Day One Studios office, they had like giant statues in there. Firaxis also has like this really cool alien from XCOM, like fully modeled out. The thing is like 10 feet, 12 feet tall. There's like a lot of that stuff going on in offices. So it used to be this huge status symbol. I don't know. It might turn the other way. Like people might say, like, why are you in an office, you polluting piece of crap? Like,
and that was brought up as well. It might even become a stigma of old people like us. We have an office.
Leave your house. What?
TikTok. So shut up. All right. That's where we're making our stand. So I'm looking over the notes that you sent me on all of the stuff we're putting together.
You're looking at that awful thing about hardware, right? Like, I think this is just something indies should stay away from and like save themselves the mental hassle.
Just how many systems that you have to buy and all of. See, I've never had to deal with that. Thank God.
Yeah. So you saw the that controller we made for VR, the foot thing that lets you kind of walk around in VR, and to get that made. And let me preface this by saying, if you're an indie, please, for God's sake, stay away from hardware. You don't want to make the guitar, you don't want to make the fishing rod, like you don't want to make any of that stuff. So I've been through it. I had to set up supply lines. I had to get the molds made, set up the factory. And of course we had to do this all overseas because everything's just so expensive in the States to create any hardware. And time again, you're going to run into a lot of cultural problems. You're going to run into a lot of communication problems. Every time you go back to a vendor, the cost of materials has gone up. So like one email ago, which was an hour and a half ago, the thing was $2. Now it's $2.80. And then the next email, it's going to be $3. They'll just keep pushing your price up, and you got to negotiate. You got to find all of the components. Like the Sprinter controller has something like 80 or 90 components. And I had to source every one of those from a different factory, or if a factory did multiple things at the same time. And then you have to set up shipping from those factories to the main factory. You have to come up with instructions on how to build the device. You have to go through tons of iterations with the molds to make sure all the tolerances are acceptable. Like, it's just such a nightmare that I would recommend all indies run for the hills anytime someone mentions hardware.
So my wife used to work for a company that did a lot of that did the engineering behind stuff. And it was funny because it was a big multinational corporation. And they had this little tiny office with like 6 engineers in it. That was it. And one of the things that you really don't process is shipping. You know, to us, it's like, oh yeah, I bought it on Amazon and that shit showed up like 2 days later. Understanding how long it takes something to get from China to LA by boat, which is how it gets shipped.
Yeah, by boat.
The Pacific Ocean is pretty damn big. You know, it takes a while to get there. And it's little things like that that people don't think about. They're like, oh, well, we'll just add a keychain and drop it
Customs.
in our Kickstarter.
I had to hire another company to do the customs paperwork for us. Like, you don't even think about customs as being a thing. So I was like, I don't understand any of this paperwork I'm looking at. This might as well be Chinese because I can't read it. You know, bill of lading, making sure you're not bringing in things that are against the Defense Act or sending out things against the defense. Like, there's just so much to do.
Weren't PS4s considered something you couldn't send out years ago? Because if you
I remember that. Yeah.
Formed a supercomputer, and it's
the
like
processors were so powerful or something.
I can just imagine some terrorists trying to get all their shit together, and they're like, "Hold on, I got to finish God of War. All right, I've got this like I'm on the level, but we can't launch the missiles until later."
Yeah.
All right, so this is like one of
Big
those
practice in Counter-Strike.
Yeah. This is one of those like way back things. When I first started in the late 90s, when we had to send samples out to, you know, publishers around the world on whether or not they wanted to, at this point, distribute these games. And we weren't even talking publishing, we're talking distribution. We had to put them in a box. I mean, they came in a box. We had to mail them physically. And if we had 150 of them going out, I had to fill out each customs form by hand. Every single time. It was a gigantic pain in the ass. But it is, I think, you know, the bigger this industry gets, the more compartmentalized it gets as well. You know, it's like if you're an artist working at Insomniac, you may be rigging Spider-Man's leg or
just his leg.
Ridiculously finite. Whereas if you're an animator in an indie studio, you're like, yeah, I do everything. I do all of it. And the industry's gotten so big where it's like, yeah, you don't think about, I need to hire a company to do the customs forms because it's just something that doesn't, you know, gel with you because you never had to comprehend it. And that's why I look at these things like that Playdate machine that's coming out, the little hand cranked. You haven't seen this thing?
No.
It's
for kids.
It's the screaming of why are you doing this? All right, hold on, I'll find it. While I'm digging this up, let's talk about RFPs.
Yeah, publishers and RFPs, the request for proposals. So in my experience, you're going to get a ton of tire kickers. These companies that send an RFP out, collect information, and then don't act on it at all. You're gonna spend a ton of time filling out proposals, and I think in my experience, it's rare that you actually land, or even that they actually want to do the project that they sent the RFP out for. So,
all right, and so this is something that I have a lot of experience in because companies like literally hire us to get RFPs, and I will tell them, it's like, that's fine. Here's the thing that you need to know up front. You're not going to get your first 1, 2, or even third RFP because a lot of times these publishers are sending them out just simply to get counter bids against who they're actually going to give it to.
Yeah.
So this is the thing I was talking about. It's like literally, it's a game machine that they're building and it has a hand crank on it.
What's the hand crank for?
That's the game part. That's what you're actually playing. It has some sort of, here we go. So it's like you crank it and that's how the game goes. And it's like,
Well, I guess a chacun son goût, to each his own.
On one hand, I admire the creativity. I mean, I think it's innovative. It's not just another GBA or something like that. But on the other hand, it's like, oh my God, that is going to be a nightmare to develop and distribute and everything else that goes along with it.
Yeah, and market. That's the problem. Like if that thing is successful, good for them. But like marketing a piece of hardware is incredibly difficult. And by the way, anytime you get something that has free shipping, the company is eating that shipping cost. So if you're on the producer end of the hardware, just realize like if you're offering free shipping, you're going to have to eat the entire cost of shipping. And that is very expensive.
That's why you mark it up and then you call it free shipping.
Sending £5 from one side of the United States to the other can cost you like $20. And so like if your thing fits inside a box, it's $20 to get it across the country. And you're going to have to eat that shipping cost if it's free shipping.
All right, I'm going to leave this question to you. Would the only hardware you need be strictly for rendering, not gaming? Also, what's the minimum rendering resolution required for modern games? So this is going back to the whole, how do you not buy too much hardware for your office?
Well, the thing about hardware for the office is you got to buy your employees computers. Like, don't even worry about what kind of computers you get.
Don't you have to do that anyway when they're working for you?
Well, I mean, it depends, right? If everyone's working from home, they kind of got their own machines, don't they? And if it fits the specification of what you need, the min spec, then maybe you save yourself a little money.
Sure. I guess
See, this is part of the indie like resourcefulness coming out, right?
Yeah, we could save $600, just like you can get a gaming computer for $600. But yeah, it's like then you don't get to argue the whole "you made it on our hardware, therefore we own it" thing,
Well, I mean, you sign agreements that assign everything to you upon creation anyway. I mean, if they're getting paid for it and you're the one doing the paying, you need to own it.
Oh, all right. Here's one. How can indie devs even make and test games that match the new tech compatibility that just came out without buying it?
You hire a company. You hire a company to test compatibility for you.
I mean, you look at how much. So even if you're doing it, everybody's like, "Oh, I'll do a mobile game. I just slap it on the iPhone." There's dozens of different versions, even before you go Android, about what it's going to work on and what it's not going to work on, and there's a lot of stuff in there that people don't necessarily realize. My favorite was the client that I had that told me that I didn't need to run their program through testing because their lead engineer told me it didn't have any bugs.
Oh, that's precious.
That's not how it works.
No.
Sure enough, it didn't. It failed the very first test.
Was the previous questioner asking about like phones and stuff? Like, if you can have a spare iPhone to test stuff on, yeah, that's fine. But what I meant was like not having to buy a team of 40 like computers every 2 years and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I think that's what they're getting at. Not necessarily that aspect of it, but when you're indie and you're on a budget, you can't go out and buy the $1,200 video card, to be running in this stuff. So, how do you, when you're building something on a lower end machine, how are you making sure it's working on somebody's higher end machine? And that's
so I mean, generally the higher end machines are going to do fine when you're building on lower spec. So the only real thing you can do is hire people to do compatibility testing. You're going to have to spend some money. So it's better to give it to a company that has 90 different or 150 different computers that can test it against, whereas you'd have to go buy all of these things to do that, and it'll just cost you a lot more money.
All right, so let's get back to the hard questions on RFPs. So one, what are they? They are the proposals basically that publishers and media companies send out, and they're like, hey, we need this game developed, or we need this aspect of a game developed, send us a bid. And so then the developers sit down and they spend a ton of time, and it's not
schedules, budgets, team composition, design elements. Like you end up basically doing a ton of pre-production work.
It's a week's worth of work easily.
At least, yeah. And you're probably not going to get it.
Exactly.
So I don't know. I think honestly, best to work with someone like, and this is not a plug or anything, best to work with someone like Jay when it comes to getting RFPs to kind of vet the people sending the RFP. And don't think just because it's a big company that their RFP is legitimate. You're not going to get the work just because, EA sent an RFP out and you think, oh yeah, they're definitely going to hire someone. Probably not going to be you if they're actually even trying to hire anyone at that moment.
And you have to keep in mind too that a lot of these proposals aren't sent out for games that are actually even planned. I see a lot of RFPs come in, and the contact at the publisher or wherever, most of them that know me well enough to know don't try to blow smoke up my ass because I don't care. I'm not going to listen to it, but they'll tell me it's like, look, this is something that we need to get budgeted so we can get approved. And the best I do is tell my clients, it's like, look, this is where you have to walk that fine line between I'm going to do enough to get the bid, and I'm not going to spend so much time on it. This is a giant money sink, that you do have to factor that into these different proposals.
Right. And your time is money too. So if you're spending 3 weeks on this, you're losing money.
It absolutely is. But, you need to realize going in, especially if you've never gotten an RFP from that company, they're testing the waters. And that's what I tell our clients. It's like, yes, I know your probability of landing this is like less than 1%, but you need to do it, because what happens is a lot of these companies, they send them out and it's like, yeah, they already pretty much know who they want to do it, but they want to test other options and or use your proposal to
get it cheaper. Yeah.
Other company.
I hate that, man.
Yeah. Well,
it's tough to avoid, but I hate that. Like you put in all this work and they just get a cheaper studio to do it or something like that.
The worst are the ones that you never get feedback on. And I've got clients going, well, what did they think? I was like, I don't fucking know. They won't tell me. They won't. It's just like, oh, we're not doing this anymore. I was like, well, are you not doing it anymore? Or are you not doing it anymore with one of my teams? Or
if you can get a no, that's kind of nice. So
yeah, I mean, but you need to do, like I tell them, it's like 2 or 3 of these, because the publisher's trying to get a temperature of what you do and how you do it and how good it is and how much it is. And so you got a much higher chance of getting that 3rd or 4th one than you do the 1st or 2nd one, but you still have to. I think so. Here's an interesting though. This kind of ties into it. I feel like the game industry has kind of it's always been a little bit high school cliquish, but I think the arrogance in the industry has gone a little too high these days. So there's people who don't bother to respond even when you've done business with them before and things like that. And I'm just putting this out there, like take the time to respond to people when they talk to you. Cause you never know, when a relationship might be fruitful down the line, aside from it just being the polite thing to do. It's that is something that's come up at several points during the conference. It's like we always, and this is what I tell students and anyone who's new to the industry, that's the wrong banner. There we go. All right. I swear I only just started drinking. Okay. But you can't burn bridges in this industry. And, that's the reality, because at the end of the day, we all know each other, and if we don't know each other, we can find each other really, really quickly.
And we're bound to run into each other. It's too small to not happen.
Yes.
Yeah. And saying no, like, see, here's the thing, and I'll get to this later, because I did a micro talk on like rejection and getting your demo turned back and all that stuff. But saying no to someone is a whole lot better than not answering them. Yeah. Because if you say no, they're like, okay, I understand, I appreciate it, thank you for your perspective, let me move on. When you don't answer someone, they're like, oh, okay, so I'm not even worth the time to get a response from you. We're never going to do business. And that's actually something that Matt Hawkins from Top Cow Comics, the Witchblade guys, he taught me way back in the day. He said, if you embarrass someone, they are never going to do business with you. And I think one of the number one ways to do that is to just ignore people and not give them the basic decency of a response a lot of the time.
So you want some real statistics on this?
All right, let's hear it.
This has not changed in 10, 20 years, or at least 10 since we've been doing digital distribution and everything else. I can have 2 games from a client or from different clients, whatever, very similar in scope, budget, genre, platform. Let's just say 2, JRPGs, for example, because there's a ton of different variations in it, but there's still the same gameplay. We can send game 1 out, and over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to get about a 30 to 35% response rate, and that's people who respond at all, not people who are interested in it. People who take the time to go, we're not interested, count as well. We can send the very similar game out, a week later to the same people, and we'll get a 30 to 35% response rate, but it will be a different 30 to 35 people. I can't explain it.
People are busy. I listen, here's the thing. You hear it a lot from like game journalists. They have 70,000 emails in their inbox. So it's not always possible to respond to everybody, but you should at least make some effort. Journalists have it differently than like publisher, reps and all that.
Especially in the days of, Google filling in your emails for you. It's like, it really doesn't take long to go, no thanks, because you literally just hit a button and it sends it out.
Here's a trick you can use. Set up a signature that's a form rejection. Thank you very much for contacting us. Unfortunately, this isn't what we're looking for right now. I hope I have the opportunity to work with you in the future. And just turn that whole thing into a signature and just hit that one button and hit send. That'll save you hours in responding to emails you need to reject,
I mean, I have Gmail set up where you can do the quick text, whatever, the little thing. I don't know what it's called. Because
I'm an Outlook dude. I don't know what Gmail can do.
I don't know what Outlook can do. I haven't used it in years. I constantly get the emails from contractors that want to know if we want to hire them to develop a game. And I'm like, you didn't even take 2 seconds to read what we do.
Yeah, that's wholly unacceptable. People who contact you and have no clue what you do, you don't have to respond to them. They can go on with that bullshit. You don't need to respond to that at all.
But it's like every now and then you have like that day that you're just like, you know what, I'm going to fuck with this person. And so I get this on LinkedIn a lot. People have that generic LinkedIn intro, and it's like, I looked at what you do and I love your work and blah, blah. And every now and then I'll get one and I'll just reply, so what do you like about it? And then I never hear from them again. It's like, don't ask to tell me. And somebody else, I don't know if it was in the Discord or somewhere, I saw somebody this morning talking about, don't ever tell a developer that you really like, their game, when in reality you've never played it, because we will figure it out and we will call you out on it. And yes, that's very...
don't lie to people. It doesn't work. Google is so quick, so easy, and like they could just call you on what you say.
Yeah.
So
I'll bet you I get 2 emails a week from a vendor wanting to know if they will, if we want to hire them to do engineering or something like that. And I'm like, you didn't even look. The bare minimum.
The thing that along those same lines, the thing that aggravates the hell out of me is I run an art and programming outsource studio, right? I get tons of emails from art outsourcers and programming, teams like, would you like to hire us to make your game? I'm like, we're an outsource company. Stop emailing me to outsource my outsource to you. What are you doing? It's like, I don't know.
The comparable is we get the ones where they're asking me if I need help with lead generation. And I'm like, I run a business, biz dev consulting firm. Like, my job is lead generation.
I mean, I couldn't even see that working in the game industry anyway. There's no like master list of specific people to hire. Everyone is constantly jumping from one studio to the next. The stack of business cards I have this big from GDC 2019, it's all useless now because all those people have gone to different positions. Like, what kind of lead generation could you
still have them rubber banded with a piece of paper that says GDC 2019 because God forbid we ever get rid of it? In 20 years, I have never gone back to my business cards and gone, who was that person that I couldn't remember? But I have them all right over there. I mean, going back to, however long, they're there if I need them. But
there was a time I was working with Ed, Ed from Fog that you're doing.
Ed Illy.
Sentinel. You guys are doing that together.
Yep.
And he told me I should scan the business cards I think he was messing with me. He's like, yeah, put them all in the scanner and make sure you check them all out. Make sure you scan everything you got at GDC.
It is. I used to sit in the airport with my phone and like taking pictures of them, and it would import them but you still have to have them, or at least, I don't know.
There's something about
you
them.
still needed a business card. It made you look like a real person. But nowadays, I'm like, I don't know if I'm even going to stand on that hill anymore and defend it. It's like, I don't know. Do we? We're not even doing in-person shit anymore.
Yeah. Man, this COVID thing really just it changed everything, didn't it?
All right. So hold on. We got an RFP question. So Jesse says, what does an RFP look like in practice? Is there an established process, or is it as simple as a pitch your game contact form on the corporate website? Jesse, it depends on how professional the publisher is.
Yeah, and it's not even a pitch your game kind of thing. Like, you might get an RFP for a game that the publisher already has in mind, or you might get an RFP for doing a port for one of their existing titles, and they'll just kind of outline what they're looking for and tell you how to respond. So a lot of times there'll be instructions in the RFP on exactly how to format your response.
So the good ones have, outlines. We need a puzzle game with this many levels, and here are some examples of puzzle games that we like, and we need this much dev time that should have this many, levels in it. All of the good ones outline all that stuff, and then you get the ones where it's like, Jay, listen, we need a puzzle game. Can you find us one?
Yeah.
Or can you get one made for us? And it's like, dude, you got to give me more than this, and the big catch is always, how much do we charge? How much do we say? And it's tricky, because it's like, at the end of the day, the publisher wants you to do it as cheap as possible. And I don't care who says it. And 90% of that publisher's decision is going to come down to how much it costs.
Yeah, they pretend it doesn't. And we care about the quality and the team. Like, no, you care about the price and whether, I just graduated and I actually know how to code or whatever. You mostly just care about the price.
It was even worse when we were doing like however many licensed GBA games, we did a year. And it's like, they really didn't care. It's just like, is it going to work when we ship it? That's what we want to know. But, it does come down to the budget. And so what I tell developers is, you always have to throw that question back at the publisher and say, so what's your budget range on this? And they'll tell you, oh, it doesn't matter.
Ping pong that, though. You know that. They'll send it right back to you. And
if you go back and say, all right, so if I send if you put a hard number in front of them, no matter how ludicrous it is,
right,
it's
then they'll tell you.
Game. Okay, so if I go back in, if we send you a bid for a Flash game that's $300,000, you're going to be looking at that, right? And that's when they'll go, no, we want.
Then they tell you their range.
In this range. And even then, you better be at the bottom end of the damn range.
Yep.
Because if they tell you they want it for $600,000 to $750,000, don't send them. Those are the RFP. Because I used to send RFPs, in addition to. I hated the ones that came in when I told them we're looking $600,000, $750,000, and then I get a budget that was like $742,500. It's like, you just picked. It's like the Price is Right, the opposite of it. You didn't go with the $1. You went $1 under what I said I would pay.
Yeah.
That does.
So I've gotten RFPs before that kind of outline what they want to spend and what their budget is. And 99% of the time they're lying about their budget too. So it's usually nowhere near as high as the number they put. If they say they want to spend $500,000, they're probably trying to spend like, I don't know, 250, 300. So you're going to see some of that too. Like, don't believe anything they tell you.
But that honestly, and I've had clients, and it wants me to I want to just beat my head on the desk when they do this, but you can tell their version of negotiation is, I want to get in here and get every dollar out of this deal I can possibly do. And you know what? That's a perfectly viable form of negotiation. It just, in my experience and opinion, doesn't fucking work, because somebody else is going to do it, realistically. And so,
hold on.
Sorry.
Here you go.
Are we doing show and
tell?
tell?
What you need.
Oh, getting to yes. Negotiating agreement without giving in. Oh,
so
good.
this book outlines a completely different way to negotiate. It's written by Robert Fisher and William Ury. And so the basic premise of this for negotiation is find out what both sides need and try to find a way to kind of come together and produce that.
Yes.
Yeah, don't take necessarily opposite sides of a table. And the cool thing about this is, like, when you let them know, I'm negotiating with you using this framework. Why don't you guys look it up? Because the more people, no, here's the thing, the more people,
gonna do it.
they're not going to do it. But the point is, like, the more people who know about this method of negotiation, the easier it becomes to actually form an agreement. Because it's not always being combative. It's not always trying to trick the other side or whatever it is. If you can identify what you need and what they need, you can find out what you want and what they want and how to kind of bring all those things together and walk side by side.
Yeah, I call it also the not being an asshole version of negotiation. But that is it. The people who win the bids aren't the ones that come in and bid $5 underneath the maximum bid. You, as the developer, need to figure out what it's going to take accurately to get their project done. Build you a cushion on top of it. Because shit's going to go sideways. That's just I don't care.
Profit is not a dirty word. You need to make money to survive.
That's one of those things that drives me nuts too, is the developers who have spent like 2 or 3 years working on a project and then they're like, oh, we're not going to take an advance, we'll make money off the royalties. I'm like, no, you won't.
No, you won't. No.
that ain't going to happen. I mean, and if it does, congratulations, you're part of the 5%. But you absolutely, when you're doing that P&L, and a plug here. So, Heather Chandler was on yesterday and she did a whole session on how to build a budget for your indie game. If you have and I think you've only got like 15 more minutes. If you go to indiegame.business and get a pass to our show, you're going to get that thing. We're sending out all the slide decks and all that kind of good stuff to all the attendees. But in that, it goes through exactly how to build a budget. It's a spreadsheet sample that she put together for everybody, but you absolutely have to have a profit margin in there.
Yeah, for sure. And on top of that, that kind of leads into the next point. Like, everything is informational now. We used to get like this gut feeling and we'd make a game based on that, but that doesn't really exist anymore. Especially when it comes to mobile, there's a wide body of hard data on how to make your game and how to do user acquisition. And, you want to get to your minimum viable product as fast as possible. The ones that the companies that are successful are usually getting there within like 3 months.
Yeah.
For that kind of thing. They only bring in-house the jobs that they have to, and they focus on the retention, like the day 1, day 7, day 30, all that stuff also. I really recommend people look at the vast body of knowledge available to them when choosing what game to make. This is aside from RFPs and all that.
But no, I mean, it's even, this is the beauty of these events. It's like, even I learn stuff every now and then. And I had a developer pitch me a game and he showed me a part of Steam Spy that I didn't even know existed, when you can do the X cross or examine or whatever. And he had literally, he was pitching a game and he had taken 2 similar games from 2 different genres. So you got like the little Venn diagram, but he had pulled that data directly from Steam Spy. So it was like, if you're doing, let's say, Borderlands, it's like this many people like first person shooters and this many people like action RPGs that are loot dropping. And you go on Steam Spy, you see exactly how many people own those 2 games, and you can do a little Venn diagram that says there are this many gamers on Steam who own both of these games. And it's like, there you go. And it's a very simple form of, analytics that you can do. But yeah,
to know what to make. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like we all have a gut that leads us in a certain direction. It's like right now, I'm like, where are all the RTS games? Everything else is coming back, and we've remade some of like Age of Empires and Command and Conquer. Where are the new RTS games coming back? So I have no doubt there's people out there working on it. But we can have that sort of gut, but you've got to be able, especially when you're pitching to a publisher, you've got to be able to back that up with numbers.
Right. Especially for mobile publishing, like everything is analytics driven. And so here's the problem you're going to run into with a lot of mobile publishing, right? And this ties into actually how the VCs have flooded the game industry and stuff. They're backed by, everything has to be backed by metrics. People are not giving you money to make your thing. They're giving you money to grow your thing. So they kind of already want you to have a certain amount of success. They want your KPIs in place already, which means you finished the game, you've soft launched, or at least, you've gotten your MVP, you've soft launched that, and you've got metrics to show them. So until you've like soft launch and your KPIs are perfect, you got a bunch of users, they're not going to talk to you. And what they want to do is kind of just step in once you're already successful and help it to grow. So it's got its ups and downs,
I see it all the time, and I agree, but that's lazy as shit.
You're not going to get I agree with you.
I want you to do all the hard work.
Yeah, of course, and take all the risk.
Test it, everything, and then if everything's perfect and lines up, then we'll invest in it.
Right.
It's like, how do those developers, part of the reason you need a publisher is to actually get those KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
How can I give you accurate KPIs if I'm telling you I need you to get it out there and get the KPIs?
This is that catch. Like, this industry is full of catch-22s. Entry level job with 5 years experience, have the KPIs in order to get a publishing deal. Like, it just happens all the time. The thing is, though, if you can get to there used to be this story about how like musicians would get completely screwed on their first record label, and they'd make it up later. It's kind of the same here, though, right? To some degree. If you can get in with one of these publishers and they take your game that has okay KPIs, take it to a vast audience, and now you're making a couple 100,000 a year or more, you got your own money now, bro. You have your own money. You can do things when you have your own money. Having economic power gives you creative power. So don't necessarily like bend yourself into a pretzel trying to get the best deal possible on your very first game. Get a good deal. Don't get screwed. But when you have your own money, you can start to really set your own destiny. And that comes from success, unless a rich uncle wants to write you a check or something.
And then the other side of the catch-22 comes in is once you have your own money and that leads to your own creativity, you make some dumbass game that nobody actually wanted to play except you, and then you have no money in the end,
right?
And you get to do it all over.
And then you can trade on your name. Look, I made this title 5 years ago.
Then you get to be a consultant. That's
right.
All right,
this ties into the whole VC thing, right? So over the last
one of the questions. Are you watching questions too?
What's that? Oh, are people asking questions?
It's like, what kind of traction numbers do you need in a soft launch for a mobile game to get VCs interested in you?
That's different. Everybody asks for something different.
In general, Megalena, look at, I don't know off the top of my head, but there are benchmark numbers for day 1, day 7, day 30 retention.
Percentages, yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what they're looking for. If you can even get close to that without, having to get a publisher and you're doing this on your own, you're good. And there are publishers out there as well who will do a test case for you.
Yeah. Unity is actually one of them. Unity has a program that does that. They'll spend a little money.
Yeah. So, there's ways to do it, but, the catch, especially for indie devs, and this is why I constantly tell indie devs not to make free-to-play mobile games. It's like, you're going to get eaten alive. You literally have no prayer. That's just. And
multiplayer games. You're going to get hit by a lot of publishers who don't want to deal with multiplayer games from indies also.
Yeah. And so until you can do it and do it properly, it's tough. It's absolutely going to be tough. Just stay the fuck away from it. Make the free-to-play games when somebody else wants to pay for you to make them, and you're going to learn from them. But at the end of the day, it comes down to day 1, day 7, day 30 retention. And if those numbers remotely look like what the benchmark numbers are, and somebody was sharing sites like Newzoo and It's like Simon Carlos is a newsletter that has this stuff in it all the time.
All those companies that give you something like an API to put inside your game so that they can track your. Is that what you're talking about?
No, I mean, yeah, there's those, but I mean, don't be putting your game is like
add our API to your product so we can spy on you.
Oh, no, I mean, but these are like research companies that go around and they run data. It's like App Annie and
okay.
Some of those that they'll run these numbers and you can Google them. It's like, what were the average retention rates benchmarks for 2020? And that stuff will come up. Just get close to that. But the bigger question is, why as an indie are you doing a free-to-play game? And don't do it and just no. So Jesse asked, back to RFPs, are they more detailed and tailor-made rather than public calls to action? Well, one, they're rarely ever a public call to action. You know, they have their short list of people they want to go to. And then there's people like me who bug them constantly going, I've got, 8 studios. Do you want, to get in front of them? And some of them realize, hey, if we send stuff to Jay, we send one email and we get like 8 proposals. If we send it to everybody else, but unless it is government funded RFPs have to be publicly available.
Yeah,
but you got to find them.
and here's the thing: I've been a part of a bunch of those government things. Like, you should be very careful. Like the SBIR stuff. Like, a lot of tech companies will contact the game company and say, we want you to write this section of the RFP or whatever. And when it comes time to actually, even if it gets awarded to them, they can drop you. And a lot of times they will drop you to find someone cheaper or, closer, or maybe even do it internally. So just be very careful. Like, get something in writing from any tech company that's bidding on an SBIR thing before you do it with them.
The greatest government RFP quote to me was it in Armageddon where they're getting ready to launch and he goes, guys, I don't want you to be nervous, but just realize that we are sitting on top of a machine by the absolutely lowest bidder. Like, yeah, that's it. But no, RFPs from publishers are never public. They have a short list of people they want to go to. That's who they go to. And whether or not they are detailed just literally comes down to the proposal, to the publisher, and sometimes even to the producer at the publisher who wrote it. Oh, sorry. Eyes are burning here. Don't
die, Jay. We're almost through this COVID thing. Keep it together.
I live in the mountains, man. As long as we can keep the tourists away from us, we're fine. The problem is keeping.
There's like 3 trillion people at the Costco here, man. I got to go in there with like tactical gear to get some milk.
Duck and roll. Yeah. Here's the other one I want to bring up, Jesse. Yeah, don't name drop. Just don't. I mean, it just makes you look like a tool. I mean, whether or not you actually know the people or not, it just makes you look bad. So
yeah. I've name dropped before and I felt like a moron doing it, so don't. Avoid the mistake.
And the other thing is, in this industry, you literally run the risk of name dropping somebody that you don't know, and the person that you are talking to is like, that's my best friend. There's no way you know him. It's like, so yeah, don't do it. All right, what's next?
Yeah, we're low on time, but I did want to mention that I don't think
we haven't even gotten through half of this document.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things people need to know. God damn it!
All right,
a lot of ways to get screwed here.
God, what do you want to hit at the end here?
Listen, I think maybe indies should be avoiding VCs and going maybe to talk to some angels instead. An angel investor. What's that?
They should be going where instead?
To angel investors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I listen, don't ever get money from your parents because you're going to lose it. I've said this before countless times. Don't borrow money from your family. Don't take food out of your own mouth to try a game out. But angel investors
take it.
What's that?
I said, don't borrow it, but if you can take it, that's.
The thing with angel investors is that they don't necessarily take a big ownership, and they prefer convertible notes, which means it can become debt later on. So that means they don't have any control, and they're not spending someone else's money. So they're they're going to be more invested emotionally in the process. So I think angels might be a better route for a lot of indie developers than VCs.
And typically, indie teams don't need the amount of money. I mean, VCs have a minimal amount of money they want to invest in you. You don't
Right.
go to a VC and go, "I need 300 grand," because
Right.
they're not interested. You
Yeah.
know, but angel investors, that's more their range.
Uh-huh.
The question is, we get people that come to us a lot and say, can you put us in front of investors and angels? And I'm like, no, it's just not what we do. But where would somebody even get started? How do you find angels that are going to fund?
I'm not giving all my secrets away, man. You stay away from my money. Find them yourself. Go pray. That's how you see an angel. Go pray.
Start at Crunchbase and then go from there.
Yeah. No, there's 1.5 million places. Just do a couple Google searches. You'll find people who are talking about investing in the game industry. And you just got to do a lot of legwork. Like a lot of this industry and a lot of the biz dev side of it is just doing legwork.
It is. Oh my God, one of my favorites. I had a client that hired us, and of course, when for the majority of our clients, we are on a retainer basis. So we're going out and doing this work every month. It's just like hiring us. You're basically hiring an in-house biz dev team, but for way cheaper than the whole team would be.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't want to. They needed to save some money, and I was like, okay, look, we can go out and get you warm leads, and then we'll pass them on to you. And they were like, okay, that works. We can handle that. And we were doing that. And then I'm sitting there watching the tracking sheets, and I'm like, why are none of these deals going anywhere? And he's like, well, I need you to handle it. I'm like, no. He goes, well, it's hard. And I was like, no shit, it's hard.
It's hard. It was easy.
That's why I charge money to do it. It is. It is extremely time intensive to go out and do this stuff. And you have to be willing to do it. I mean, that's the reality of it. All right, wait, here's one. What do you think about FIG and community equity for indies? First off,
I haven't gone anywhere near FIG. So not for any specific reason or whatever, but I haven't had time to look into it. So I couldn't give you any useful info for that.
One, you got to realize FIG at the end of the day is still an investment firm, or in some way, whatever the legal thing of it is. So they're still going to be looking for, very low risk opportunities. They want something they can put some money into, turn a profit, and, everybody's happy at the end of the day. FIG is very, very, very highly curated. I mean, you don't have a very good chance of getting in there and being one of the studios that they're working on. If you can, it's great, because like any smart investment studio, they don't take projects that they don't think is going to be successful. It's not like
Steam before they let anyone. Well, I mean, Steam was a sales platform, but like kind of the barrier to entry was higher. If you could get on Steam back in the day, you were almost guaranteed to make money until they opened it up. And now,
exactly. If you can get into FIG, then you're going to be okay. But it's very hard to get into. And then community equity, man, it's just, that scares the shit out of me.
You got to have a community first. And that's hard. You got to have a game to get a community, and then they can, I don't know. That's tough. That's like saying go on, what is that, Patreon, and
Yeah, and I know studios who have Patreon, and I support some of them on Patreon. But I ask them, it's like, what percentage of your revenue comes from Patreon? They're like, very little.
It's not enough to make a game.
Yeah,
like I don't know, a medium-sized normal game.
It's my thing is we have a hard enough time getting people credits and getting people paid that actually worked on the project. When we start dealing with community equity and, all of a sudden that developer's got to find, whoever Rick Bob 4100, that invested $20 in the game. It's just, to me at this stage, it brings up more questions and concerns that is worth it. And I quite frankly haven't seen that many games developed on it solely anyway. So what are the big no-nos when it comes to getting good investors? Like, what you don't go around saying or asking for in general.
I mean, we could do
you
a
don't know what you're
whole,
looking for. Go ahead.
yeah, we could do a whole like show on just what to do with investors. Like that's, it's hard to even begin. I'll tell you this: instead of worrying about them, worry about yourself to begin with. You're gonna have to protect yourself from them. They see a million deals a year. You're looking at one or two. So you need to find out how they operate, and understand. This is going to sound really stupid about game industry, but find out how the dynamics of power works. It's important in negotiations. There's a book I recommend called The 42 Laws of Power. Understand how people relate to each other. Increase your own personal understanding of communication. You're going to find that throughout your career in games that most of the problems are not technical, they're people problems. And those are by far the hardest problems to solve. So don't worry about what you're going to say or not going to say. There's a million podcasts you can listen to for that stuff. All I got to tell you is protect yourself and understand how they can come at you. And don't look at it as an adversarial relationship, but be prepared to defend yourself in one.
The other thing, and this is, I think it's going to be even more prevalent in the coming months and years because so much spotlight has been put on our industry. It's like, everything else is struggling and shutting down, but games is like exploding right now. So you're having more investors, look at our industry.
2020 was the biggest investment year for games, and 2021 they're saying it's going to be like another 30 to 40% more investment.
The thing that I always tell people when they're saying, okay, we're talking to this investment company or that investment company, you need to understand how well they understand games. Because the major issues I've always seen between investors that I've dealt with and investors that, my clients have dealt with and is they don't fundamentally understand how this industry works. Right. Somebody told them if they invested in games, they would make millions, but they don't get how it works. And then you've got some of them that come in and it's like, well, this is how we did in the airline industry. It's like, well, you're not in the airline industry anymore. And quite frankly, our industry doesn't fit any sort of mold. So it doesn't matter where you were before.
They have a widget production mentality, and that's not how this works.
Yep.
So you're going to be educating a lot of people. And unfortunately to that end, you might find a lot of people just pumping you for information and not really doing a deal with you.
That's a lot of it as well. And if you do find that rare investor that wants to invest in your company and they understand the game industry, well, that's your unicorn right there. Investors talk about certain companies being unicorns. If you can find the investor that really understands our industry and how it works and wants to invest in you, that's the unicorn. Shoot it.
Just keep in mind that a unicorn has a gigantic sharp spike coming out of its face. It's pretty. Don't let it ram you with the spike.
All right. So on the note of unicorn visceration,
that's my next game. No stealing.
You can have it, dude. I'm done making games. It's like I will help people make games till the end of the world. But I was a producer. I was an executive producer. I can't. I even designed back in the day. It's like I ain't touching any of that anymore. It's too complicated. But yeah,
the reshitting is complete.
All right, so we're going to, obviously have to do the re-shitting in a month or two on the podcast.
The omni-shitting.
If we're doing 3 or 4 of these conventions a year, conferences, whatever we want to call them, I mean, I think this is the way we should end every single one of them because my mind is in this mentality after 3 days of running this thing anyway, that I really, truly enjoy sitting down and drinking a beer and just answering.
Let's make this the end cap.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for 3 days and Indie Game Business Sessions Winter 2020, which as long as a title as that is, it's actually shorter than the ones we used to have. This is it. It's a wrap. We're done. Find us on Discord, discord.gg/indiegamebusiness. We have, I think, as of now, over 2,200, industry professionals on there. It ain't going to be the most active Discord that you ever have, but it's the most quality. Because,
you'll get your questions answered by someone who knows what they're talking about.
And quickly too. That's the best part. So thanks everybody. We'll be around. We ain't going anywhere. Peter, thanks for hanging out and
right. See you guys next time.
Shooting the shit. And we'll see you in a couple of months.
Yep.